Signs of the Southland, Monday, May 16th, 2022. Mr. Grant, this is a rapid fire episode. You have to be somewhere at 9. I just got back from a run and I'm dying for some water. So we are going to start right ahead with number 7 men's lacrosse in their championship tournament. They won against Concordia Irvine by a goal. They smashed and grabbed number 1 VT in the quarterfinals. They narrowly escaped Clemson in the semifinals, 12-10. And then they fell to South Carolina again in the final. I don't have the final score of that in front of me. Another successful season for a very, very good men's lacrosse program, historically good men's lacrosse program, especially after, a not so great of a start to the year, an uncharacteristic start to the year, mind you. But what do we make of this latest sort of, got right up to the top and just couldn't pip the current hotness?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to lose the two biggest games of the year to the same team, I think. Obviously, it was a really successful year. They beat the number 1 team in the country on the way to the national championship, but that's not the championship game, right? You play until you win the tournament or until you're out. And in this case, they're out. So again, no shame in that or anything like that, but man, it's tough to lose twice there.
Yeah, it's rough. And I know that they have been in the same spot before. I mean, there were a couple years where they were consistently losing to Chapman University in the final. I think that was like 2 out of 3 years they had lost to Chapman. And there was another year where it was a different school. So they've been in the final a bunch. I don't see why they wouldn't be next year and the year after that. So it's a good team. It's a young team. I think we talked about that a bunch. There's been a lot of roster turnover, and we'll keep following them and see what they do. I mean, they were number 7 in the nation and the national runner-up just on the balance of this existing young roster. So the floor here is really high.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to think that with the staff that they have, being as acclaimed as they are and as having great longevity as they've had, they've built a juggernaut from the alumni and family support all the way down to getting kids in the building. So no huge concern there. I mean, it's exciting, right? That's why you play the games is to see what happens, and they came up short, but I don't think that's any shame in that either.
Also, last note on lacrosse, Ken Lovick, elite Twitter poster. He knows how to get his team's name out there, and I respect it. But odd fart year. Congrats to them on being nationals runner-up, and I mean, we'll see how they do next year.
Honestly, in terms of posting and getting the name out there, there's a number of club sports that I think could do well to have a similar attitude. Seeing the void, if I knew more about men's and women's soccer or women's lacrosse or stuff like that, I'd be definitely out there for more games. But the hot wow, I almost said hockey, the men's lacrosse boys, but the hockey is definitely number 2 in terms of getting that stuff out there. They do a great job, and honestly, I'm biased as everyone who's listened to at least one episode of this podcast knows I love club sports. So definitely great to see them, who are, it's a true student athlete type experience. So great to see them do good on that.
Absolutely. Speaking of a sport that gets a little bit more of a national media distribution, Georgia Tech softball was at the ACC tournament this past weekend. Elite segue, by the way.
I was going to say just a bit more exposure, playing on ESPN versus whatever they stream lacrosse games on.
Just a bit. They were at the ACC tournament this past weekend. They made the play-in round as the 7 seed. They took care of business versus 10 NC State. They made it to the quarterfinal. I think it's a quarterfinal. I don't really know how these things are named anymore. Versus number 2 Duke, which was very close. I think it was a 4-3, and Tech brought it to within that one run in the bottom of the 6th, and then Duke just kind of laid the hammer, as they are wont to do. So
I mean, they're pretty darn good. It's one of those things that I think we've griped a lot about on the podcast. Is like, wow, Duke and Clemson, they came in and they were really good. Like, that's unfair. How did this happen? The conference is so much harder. But you think that, wow, the 7 seed in the ACC tournament, wow, with how the conference has been over the years, there's no way they'd make a tournament. But they played all year, solid enough to a place where they didn't need to get a bunch of wins at the last minute, or to pad that bubble resume. I think every ranking I saw them had them between like a 22 and a 30 in terms of metrics going into the end of the year. And not that it didn't matter that they didn't beat Duke, because they darn near came close until the last inning or two. But I don't know. It's weird to be in a spot where, frankly, they didn't need the help,
And you're sort of bearing a lead in that Georgia Tech softball did make its first NCAA tournament in a literal decade, going back to 2012. And I think that's almost 2-3 staffs ago. So quite a turnaround in 2022 or 21-22 by Eileen Morales and co. They will be in the Gainesville Regional. Your participants in said regional: number 14 national seed Florida, Georgia Tech is the 2, Wisconsin as the 3, and Canisius, I think that's how you pronounce that, I don't know, Latin's hard, as the 4. One note from ye old athletic director Todd Stansbury: this means that every women's team at Georgia Tech has made their respective postseason. You added the note that women's cross country didn't have any qualifiers, but I think women's cross country, track and field, that whole office is one large department. So
yeah.
I don't blame the guy that's advocating for his program to go higher in the Directors Cup standings for goosing his own numbers.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. I will say that it's great all around. I think we really are liable, or have in the past lumped the softball plus women's basketball plus volleyball onto these same trends of, hey, there's this opportunity, and hey, what did we say about having a successful year there? It was going to be volleyball making the postseason, had hosted a regional and had their best season ever. Women's basketball, biggest win in program history, made the tournament. And then you had softball, who's still playing games past the end of the conference tournament. And heck, when we first started this podcast, it wasn't even a given that they would even get to the conference tournament. And that's with I guess they went from 8 to 10 teams, but even then it's not too crazy, considering there's 2-3 more teams than there used to be 4 or 5 years ago. So really, really great to see. In terms of conference wide, I think before we preview the Wisconsin game, because they are playing Wisconsin in the tournament, we'll talk about that in a sec. It is worth noting, just in general, how many ACC teams made it. It's 6. That lines up pretty well with the numbers I was running before the weekend. I think I had Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Duke, Florida State, Clemson, and Notre Dame. That's exactly how it shook out. Virginia Tech, Duke, Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame. I all had hostable teams. I know that isn't how it shook out in real life, because that's I don't know where that gap is. I haven't really figured that out yet, but the top of the conference was really good, honestly, to the point where it kind of ate the bottom of the conference a little bit. But I don't know, in terms of what we can expect ACC top to bottom, I think we lined up with that pretty well. And we can talk about NCAA overall in general, unless there's anything else you had.
I didn't see the whole
conference
draw. I didn't see the whole draw. I did see that 6 ACC teams had made it, and then you noted the 4 hosts. So I think just on the balance of having that many regional hosts out of your teams that have made the actual tournament is very impressive. And I think you're starting to see a lot of not a lot of national media. I'm not trying to be counterculture, but just like a lot of national media, a lot of national pundits take a look at the ACC as a stronger and stronger softball conference every year. And I think we saw that with volleyball too, right? With as you build up that middle class or that upper middle class of your conference, you're going to start being looked at better and better as a whole, as a sporting entity. And I think volleyball saw the benefits of that. Women's basketball also saw the benefits of that. I've seen that over the last couple of years, and softball in this cycle as well. As really all of that has borne fruit. I think we should switch gears.
I do want to say a segue that I had to bring that towards the NCAA tournament is that ACC did have 4 host teams. So it may not have been 5 like the numbers say they could have perhaps gotten, but FSU and Virginia Tech were at 2 and 3, and then Clemson and Duke will be at 10 and 12. Obviously, FSU's been a really strong program, really supportive of that team for a really long time. But Clemson has sold out every game for the last 2 years for their softball team. I think them getting at least 2 or 3 more games in front of their home fans is really well deserved. So definitely good to see, and gets the brand out there a little bit more. That being said, we're obviously not going to any of those sites because we're an ACC team and they don't pair up same conference in the regionals. So where are we headed?
Gainesville, Florida. I already went over the pairing. So your games are Georgia Tech, Wisconsin in the 2-3, and Florida, Canisius in the 1-4. In our notes here, you have Tech, Wisconsin. This is the opening matchup. This is kind of scary. And I think when I saw the draw the first time, and I didn't see the complete draw, but at least I saw our pod, I was like, I agree. Anytime you have to face a Big Ten team in softball in the first round, you raise an eyebrow and you're like, okay, this could go. First one's a toss up.
Yeah. So it's interesting too, because there's a certain undercurrent in the, softball world, if you will, that perhaps the, the big names received a bump or a benefit of the doubt that maybe other teams did not. In that case, I would be fascinated to see how some of this shook out. Obviously, I think Wisconsin's a strong team. I did put that in the notes in terms of expectations there. They whomped UCF in the regular season, who's been ranked most of the year. They have a win over Notre Dame. They have a win over Clemson, aforementioned Clemson, as we've talked about in the past. Going down the list as well. What else do I want to highlight? Tournament team Illinois got swept in 3 games. Beaten Big Ten champion Nebraska in 2 out of 3 in the regular season. Swept by Minnesota. Swept by Michigan. So definitely inconsistent. Oh, they did get a win over Minnesota in the softball tournament, but inconsistent. Great start to the year, but their roster, I mean, I'm a little bit biased here, having pretty large exposure from just growing up in Chicago and knowing a number of people who went on to play on that team. But no, the Wisconsin roster it's a team that's been there, if you know what I mean.
I can't find the seed list offhand, but I assume you have some numbers on where Wisconsin placed in terms of how they made the tournament here.
Yeah, so they're an at-large bid. In my numbers, I think I had them as, let's see, what seed did I have them as? I'm pulling it up 1 second.
Very prepared, by the way.
Yes, I'm vamping. Sorry, I have like 8 things open and my monitor's not set up at my new apartment yet. So it's been an interesting little swing getting things together.
No monitors, pobrecito.
Wisconsin, I had as the 40th best team coming into the weekend. I think that roughly lines up with where they shook out. Honestly, I think it's a little bit ridiculous that the Big Ten got 8 teams in, including Rutgers, who I want you to guess what Rutgers' RPI was.
106.
Worse.
210.
Better, but 210 for an at-large bid is insane. It was actually 124 in adjusted RPI and 83rd in strength of schedule. So I literally have no idea how they made it in. Just putting that one out there.
They had a good Big Ten tournament, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know. The Big Ten getting 8 teams in with certain ACC teams and Pac-12 teams getting left in the cold. 12 out of the 13 SEC teams making it is a lot. And anyways, back to the fact of the matter. Wisconsin has had some quality wins. I think they can definitely be stated to have been a little more inconsistent than us. The middle of their lineup is very scary. They can hit when they're on. I don't necessarily love their pitching quite as much. Let me quote the exact numbers here. I just had it. Again, I have like 8 screens up, and so my apologies. Yes, pitching, don't love it as much. They're led by Maddie Schwartz, who is 23-11 with a 2.41 ERA. The number 2 option is Tessa Magnanimo. Oh my gosh, tough. And then a 3.93 from Ava Justman. We are almost certainly going to be seeing Maddie Schwartz, unless they're feeling so bold as to say that they are just fine throwing their number 2 option out there. So not really sure which one of them we're going to get finally, but if it's Schwartz, I think that is a pretty favorable matchup for our bats, even if it is Schwartz. Sorry, who's their number 1?
What do you have on the other side of the bracket? Obviously, Florida, number 14 national seed. I've watched a little bit of their games here and there on the big worldwide leader. Canisius, I have no idea. I didn't know as a school other than for basketball. So how do you feel like that one shakes out beyond the obvious Florida should, dunk on the small at-large or small auto bid team?
So Florida got the 14 seed, which isn't in the whole all that surprising. I believe pull up my numbers. In my numbers, I did have Florida at 15th overall. So really, really in line with what I expected. That being said, I honestly think Tech kind of lucked out here. Obviously, softball is a super top-heavy sport, even with how much parity we've seen with the ACC on the ups, with the Big 12 having a solid year, Pac-12 solid, Big 10 obviously a good year. Basically that there's powers outside of the SEC. I think the luck comes into it in the sense that Georgia Tech, in my numbers, was like mid to high 20s. They were at 24 in adjusted RPI. They've got some quality wins, right? But nothing that's like, the FSUs, the Dukes didn't really take of Clemson, didn't really take advantage of a lot of the top end opportunities.
They had Athens, to be fair.
Yeah.
One off, but it's a one-off.
And a one-off against Notre Dame, who is a host, right? But actually, they're not a host. Never mind, I lied.
Hosting your numbers, but point taken.
They're going to Evanston. My apologies. Which is another scary team, and another team I know too much about. But in terms of just the luck aspect of it, when you think about Tech being a, roughly 24 to 28, 29 team, you're then expecting them to go up against a team in the rankings that's maybe more of a, obviously you can't match up against with Virginia Tech or FSU, but they could still slot in against an Arkansas, an Alabama, one of the solid West Coast teams. Again, regional geography, all that. But for Tech to line up in the 14 seeds regional, that's not that bad, right? Because that figures to put Tech at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I'd say we're a little bit overseeded, but I don't think that hurts us, right? Because if you're overseeded, you're going to be, playing a team that's maybe not as strong as you would have lined up with. Instead of playing maybe the 8 or 9 or 7, you're lining up against 14. And obviously, Clemson was a top 15 team for sure and lost 3 to them, but it's better than, just saying, all right, here's Alabama, here's Oklahoma. Good luck.
Here's right into the wood chipper for you. Yeah. It's a much better draw than going to Oklahoma City or going to, well, I guess it's not Oklahoma City, going to Norman or going to Tuscaloosa or going to LA or something like that. But I think that first round game sort of makes a mess of it. It has the potential, you have the potential to go to a super regional just based on the quality of that top seed, maybe the adjusted quality of that top seed. But at the same time, you still got to get through the possibly overseeded or possibly underseeded Wisconsin team that's sitting right there in game one.
Yeah. Wisconsin's a team that has just too many quality wins for you to look past and say that they're a bubble team. Like in every sense of the word, they pretty much are a bubble team, right? They were in my last four in my numbers. Obviously, that committee doesn't care about what some guy in Atlanta is rumbling and stumbling with. But, I think I've been hearing from the plugged in side of me in the softball world a lot of, hey, the big names made it.
Use your therapy words.
SEC got 12 teams in. Big Ten got 8. Big Ten getting 8, that's a little more BS. But like Wisconsin got in because they're a good team with quality wins, even if they are theoretically a bubble team. I have much bigger qualms with the Rutgers or maybe the Minnesotas of the world. But then again, at the same time, when you're playing around with that, you're splitting hairs for the most part outside of the Rutgers one. But that being said, I do want to introduce just a couple more names because we talked pitching for Wisconsin, but we also should note that they have some hitters as well. Kayla Conwent, bat 377 on the year, and Allie McLesh, I always mess that one up too. 117. I think that's more the heart of the order right there. But in terms of answers to Awald and Kauf, that's your Awald Kauf combo in terms of production right there. And then you've got sitting right behind them, Fiona Gerardo and Peyton Bannon, right in the ballpark of 320 to 300. So that's 298 and over hitters. That's pretty scary. That's hard to sit down. So I think Tech's going to have to bring the bats. You're going to have to be amped, and you can't be worrying about a super regional and being overseeded against Florida before you beat Wisconsin. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to another stickball team who is fighting for their spot in the NCAA tournament, unlike the softball team. Georgia Tech baseball started off last week with a 13-12 walk-off win over Georgia Southern. They are currently 10th in the overall ACC standings in terms of tournament seeding. And this is the spicy one, as I alluded to as we started the segment. You have them as the last 4 in the NCAA field and a 3 seed in any regional. Personally, I vibe with it, but I want you to defend yourself against the Horde.
Yeah. Honestly, it's tough when I'm going to be honest. A lot of my index or the way I build the index is off of rate stats, and that punishes Tech for playing a tough schedule. Georgia Tech has played one of the harder schedules in the country, and even though they have more, I want to get the exact number because just saying more isn't that useful. But in terms of wins against the top 25 and top 50 in RPI, Georgia Tech has, hold on, where are we at? I'm scrolling, 1 second. The fact that I have to scroll this long is not a good sign. Where'd it go? Man, this is.
I told you not to make the spreadsheet this big.
The spreadsheet is really large, but Tech is at 26 in terms of adjusted RPI. But against teams that are in the RPI top 25, they are. Where'd it go? Shoot. I just had the number. That's not useful at all. That's home wins. Ugh. Give me 1 second.
This is incredible audio, by the way.
I know. It's terrific podcasting.
While you look for this number.
Oh, I found it. They're 14-12 against the top 25 in the RPI. But outside of that, they're 1-4 against 26 to 50, and then 2-3 against 51 to 100. So that's tough. They're going to have to win against Pittsburgh. They already won tonight against Akron, 12-0. It just went final. I assume there's some sort of run rule situation there because it was in the 6th 20 minutes ago when we started. But like we said, Georgia Tech, it's easy to call them a Jekyll and Hyde team because, they're, I guess, a lot going on there. That we've seen a lot of losses, but they played 26 games against the RPI top 25, and that punishes them because we put a lot of weight on that, and there's just not a lot you can do when that's such a lead weight on your schedule, right? A lot of other teams are really racking up those wins. Wake Forest 8-0 against 101 and higher. You've got Houston, 14-6. I assume Tennessee's also high, but I'm not scrolling that far down the sheet. Stuff like that.
Yeah, and it becomes even more crucial for them to take care of business versus Pitt. And I don't know if that's a take care of business versus a bad team in Pitt, because Pitt is a good team and they also play on turf, which I'm told is a bit of an impediment to proper baseballing. So it becomes really important not only to get a series win there, but also take that momentum into the ACC tournament and win a couple games there, even if that's in pool play, advancing out of pool play, and at least making the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I completely agree, honestly. And when you look at the field too, Pitt is the third to worst team in terms of RPI and rankings in the ACC, but they're 55 in RPI. And you listen to whatever baseball analyst you want to, whether that's D1, whether that's somebody that's not D1. Honestly, D1 is perfectly fine, and you don't really need to go anywhere else. But I have my flaws. Not an ad, and everyone has their flaws, we'll say. But 10 ACC teams are in the mix for making the tournament, with Pitt being the next one out, I guess, at this point, because you got Clemson, UNC, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, NC State, Wake Forest. Tech would be 11, Pitt 12. Like, the only teams out of it are Duke and BC, and you listen to every pundit in the country essentially trying to justify X, Y, and Z to get more than two Big Ten teams in the field, or to try and figure out how Mississippi State at 100 and whatever in the RPI can finagle their backdoor in. But the top of the ACC, the top 12 teams are all in the top 55. It's essentially the SEC softball situation, right? Everyone's eating each other alive. Everyone's really good. And the difference between being the ACC in baseball and the SEC in softball is one has the cachet of being that league that puts 1 million teams in. It's the same reason why you see 9 Big Ten teams in the NCAA tournament, or, hand over the heart, 10 ACC teams in the basketball tournaments, men's or women's, right? That's just kind of the brand that comes with it. And not to get all tinfoil hatty, but you got to take care of business, because they're not putting 11 teams in the tournament. So you got to win a couple games against Pitt and don't flame out of the conference tournament.
Absolutely. So just to talk about dates here and timelines, that series versus Pitt, as Zoom reminds me that we have minimal amounts of time left, that series versus Pitt is this weekend, the 19th through the 21st. Kent State comes up first, though. That's on the 18th. I think that's on the 18th. I don't know if it's on the Tuesday.
That's
wait,
tomorrow. I thought that was tomorrow.
That is tomorrow. That's the 6th year. That's the 17th. So that'll be when this goes up. Softball, is the 20th through the 22nd. So that'll overlap nicely with baseball's last series. Lots of stickball sports ahead. You got the last word before we move on.
Like we've seen over the last 10 years, softball tournaments are delightful, and postseason sports are awesome. And you could apply the same thing to volleyball or men's basketball last year or whatever it is. Watch it when you have the chance. Even if you think that you'll get another one in the next year, there's no guarantee there's another one coming soon. So enjoy this year for what it is, and try and tune in if you can.
Indeed. Moving on to the golf course, as Zoom keeps pestering me about my time. Golf is in the mix at the Columbus Regional in the NCAA tournament. They just have to finish top 5, and they are currently in 5th. We talked a little bit about you said they were in 5th.
They're in 5th, but it's a tie for 5th. So
tie for 5th. Anyway, they are in 5th currently. We talked a little bit about this last week with Jack, but here are your seeds, or your teams in this regional. Oklahoma State, the 2 national seed; Georgia Tech, the 11 national seed; Arkansas, the 14th national seed, Clemson, the 23rd national seed, East Tennessee State, Ohio State, Duke, Northwestern, Florida Gulf Coast, San Francisco, Kentucky, Wright State, and Southern Illinois. Who's on the top of the leaderboard right now?
Oklahoma State's 4 under. Everyone else is over. But Tech is I was going to say Tech is within 4 shots of East Tennessee State, and that is with the best 2 lads, Ross Steelman and Benjamin Reuter, both shooting 1 over. So yeah, they just need to do anything better than they did today, and they'll be just fine.
Get pucks in the net,
Tell the Pittsburgh Penguins that, but
in the Leafs, woof.
Oof.
I don't really have any thoughts on the golf tournament yet. I think Tech will be just fine. Like you said, they just got to keep doing what they're good at, and they have a penchant for drama, it seems, this year. So
yeah,
I'm just gonna have to see how this one goes. When is the final round of play?
They are pairing up to play. I think it's 2 more rounds. 2 more rounds. Looks like they tee off 7:30 a.m. both days, but that feels early. I mean, it's pairing, so there'll be people teeing off. Not all the time, but you know what I mean. Periodically, there will be new folks out. So presumably 7:30 a.m. would be when the leaders or the first pairing goes out. But it's golf. They'll be playing all morning if they start at 7:30.
Indeed. Let's finally move over to the running track. Wow, it's late on a Monday.
The running track.
Griffin
I prefer the swimming track, but okay.
The running track, Griffin track, except they were at Duke for the ACC the ACC conference tournament this past weekend. How did that go? I hear you have an update for me.
Yeah, so Olivia Moore, 7th in the pole vault. They had a bunch of finals finishers, but that was not from my notes on the first day. Yes, here we go. Grimes also through to the finals. John Watkins scored points, 8th place finish. That's always good to see. They love telling me about personal bests, but that really does not tell me about points, which I know is silly to gripe about, but there were a couple first team all ACC. You had Taylor Grimes, 2nd place in the hurdles. There we go. We had Shanti Papacosta, 2nd in the high jump. Nicole Fegans, 3rd place in the 5,000 meters. And then 3rd place for Lydia Troop in the 400-meter hurdles. And that one is interesting because I don't think we have ever mentioned her name on the podcast. So shame on us, but top 3 in the ACC is not a bad place to be. I do have bad news for the men, though. They got last with only 1 point. So John Watkins, thank you for that single point, because without that, it would be more sad. The women got 11th, which is better, but 15th is not great. But the women, like we said, had 4 first team all ACC finishers. So definitely a more solid exposure there. And when you think about it, they did have, I believe, 50 points overall. And you have the top of the tier of the conference that score in the hundreds, Miami and Duke. Florida State got 99, NC State at 91. And then that middle tier is, places 5 through, I guess, 11. Oh, no, wait, we had 31. I was misreading the scores. So yeah, Georgia Tech just outside that middle tier, but definitely a cut above Wake, Pitt, BC, and Syracuse. So, it's like we said last week, don't go in expecting to win an overall championship, but 4 all ACC finishes between Lydia, Nicole, Shanti, and Taylor is a great enough weekend, and they'll be in competition in the NCAA for the outdoor finals too. So
yeah, and it just comes back to the point that we've been making all year, in that they are, they're building up their depth, and we just have to wait a couple of years for that depth to pay off. And I look forward to them competing at these meets, year after year after year, with more solid, a more solid footing, not to make a really crappy pun, more solid footing in that ACC middle class.
Yep. And I guess we just wait to see how many do make it through into the NCAA. So that's really all we can wait for there.
Cool. Speaking of NCAAs, just to wrap up, women's tennis and men's tennis still waiting on those championships, those singles and doubles championships to start. That is next week, not this week, but next week. So we'll preview that next weekend. But I think that about does it for us this week. We know we are late. We know we are rushing. Mr. Grant, you have 3 minutes to wrap us up and get the last word in here.
Yep. So in terms of just what to look forward to this week, obviously baseball's in Pittsburgh, softball is in the NCAA, but really, like we said, postseason's no guarantee. So take advantage of it while it's here, even within the season, because we are staring down a summer real soon that is going to be 4 straight months without tech sports. And as much as I love the spring, we'll definitely have a nice summer of kind of circling back and unpacking everything we talked about this year, from the postseason stuff to general Georgia Tech updates to, I don't know, if somebody's got a suggestion, let us know. There's 12 weeks of summer, and I think we have 8 podcast ideas so far. So if you got suggestions, as always,
we're going to do
our lines are open
every week. We're going to take a drill tweet and we're going to relate it to a Georgia Tech thing every single week. Mark my words.
We just have to make, really clickbaity links, like top 10 craft breweries in Atlanta, top 5.
Not falling for this one. No. No big game jacket stuff.
Big game jacket. Yeah, no, that's from the clickhole seat or whatever that one website is.
Ooh.
The one that's just like all the scammy articles where it's like, you won't believe what happens next.
Unbelievable. Take us home. We got 1 minute and 30 left.
All right. From the rumbleseat@gmail.com. Email us thoughts, suggestions, ideas. If you know a lot about a certain sport and you want to be involved or suggest an idea or want us to talk more about it, always open. We have @FTRS blog on Twitter. I am also accessible on Twitter @JakeGrant98. If you have any comments, feel free to drop us a line there or on the article associated with this on From the Rumble Seat. So we look forward to hearing you, speaking with you, hearing from you. I don't know, whatever. It's a podcast. It's a visual medium. It's also a spoken medium. That's great. And we'll be with you next week.